You've been told the cowboy was a rugged loner who needed nothing, a man of iron will, pure grit, no crutches, no dependencies, but that story is a lie. Every single cattle drive that crossed the American plains in the 1880s, everyone ran on a legal psychoactive powder that the cook guarded more carefully than the cash box that cowboys fought over in the pre-dawn dark, and that trail bosses rationed like ammunition. You know this substance, you probably used it this morning, but you have absolutely no idea what it actually did to the men who built the American West on the back of it, how they consumed it in ways that would make your doctor wince, and why the version sitting in your kitchen right now is a pale, hollow ghost of the original. Picture a Texas morning in 1882, somewhere south of the Red River. The sky is still black. The herd, 3,000 longhorns, is a low, shifting rumble in the darkness 200 yards out. A cowboy named Jake, who hasn't slept more than 4 hours in 3 days, climbs down from his horse and walks toward the only light on the entire prairie, a small fire beneath a battered cast iron pot that's been sitting on coals since 2 in the morning. The cook hands him a tin cup. Jake wraps both hands around it. He doesn't sip it, he drains it, scalding hot, black as crude oil, thick enough that the grounds settle against his teeth. Then he holds the cup out for more. That pot contained Arbuckle's Ariosa blend, a pre-roasted, sealed 1 pound paper sack of coffee beans that John and Charles Arbuckle of Pittsburgh had patented in 1865, the first commercially pre-roasted coffee in American history. Jake didn't call it coffee, he called it his medicine. His trail boss called it the only thing keeping this outfit moving. The cook called it the most important item on the wagon, ahead of the flour, ahead of the salt pork, ahead of the bandages, not because he was being poetic, because he meant it literally. Here's what nobody talks about. The cowboy wasn't running on willpower. He was running on caffeine, administered in quantities that would make a modern barista's eyes water, brewed with a methodology that was closer to pharmaceutical preparation than culinary art. And when the coffee wasn't enough, when the stampede had stretched into its third straight day and men were swaying in their saddles, they found another way to use their stimulant of choice that had nothing to do with drinking it at all. So, what did these men actually know about their bodies, about endurance, about the chemistry of staying alive and functional under conditions that would destroy most people today that we have completely forgotten? Before we go further, I want to ask you something directly. Think about your mornings. Think about what your energy actually feels like right now compared to what you need it to feel like. Drop your answer in the comments below, because what you're about to discover is going to fundamentally change how you look at every single cup of coffee you've ever had. Now let's look at how we drink coffee today. You wake up, stumble to the machine, press a button, out comes a stream of pale brown liquid that took 30 seconds to produce. Maybe you've got a pod. Maybe you've got a fancy drip machine with a digital timer that your phone controls. The bag it came from was roasted somewhere between 6 months and 2 years ago, packed in an atmosphere-flushed bag with a one-way valve designed to hide the fact that the oils went stale before it ever hit the shelf. You add a splash of something sweet and creamy. You drink it while staring at your phone. And 2 hours later, you're exhausted again and genuinely wondering what is wrong with you. Here's what's wrong. You're not drinking coffee. You're drinking the industrial approximation of coffee, engineered for shelf life, supply chain convenience, and profit margin, stripped of the very compounds that made the original substance so powerful that working men in the most physically brutal occupation in 19th century America depended on it as completely as they depended on their horses. Arbuckle's Ariosa was different in every measurable way. The Arbuckle brothers developed a proprietary roasting process that applied an egg white and sugar glaze to the beans immediately after roasting, sealing the volatile aromatic oils, the compounds responsible for both flavor and the full psychoactive effect of caffeine, inside a protective coating. Oxygen is the enemy of roasted coffee. The moment a bean is roasted, it begins oxidizing, and within days, the most potent compounds begin breaking down irreversibly. The Arbuckle's glaze was a primitive but remarkably effective vapor barrier. Each pound of beans arrived at the chuck wagon in a sealed paper sack that preserved far more of its original chemistry than any loosely stored or freshly roasted and left open coffee of the era. Think of it like this. A freshly roasted coffee bean is a locked room full of everything you need. The moment you crack the seal, the room starts emptying. Within a week, half the contents are gone. Within a month, you are brewing a skeleton. The Arbuckle's process slammed that door shut and kept it shut. What came out in the cup was dramatically more potent than the same beans prepared any other way available at the time. And the cowboys brewed it like they were trying to extract every last molecule. The standard trail recipe was simple but uncompromising: one heaping handful of coarse ground coffee per cup of cold water, brought to a full rolling boil, then left to sit on the coals for up to 15 minutes. There was no filter, no paper, no cloth, nothing. Grounds floated freely in the cup. Cowboys drank the liquid and chewed the grounds left at the bottom. A trail cook named Oliver Nelson, who documented his duties in detail during his years on the trail in the 1880s, estimated using roughly 175 pounds of coffee beans per month for a crew of 12 to 15 men. Do that math. You're looking at somewhere in the range of 10 to 14 cups per man per day, each brewed at a concentration that would make a modern triple espresso look like a polite suggestion. If you're finding this valuable, hit like, because we are just getting to the part they never once mentioned in school. Here's where it gets darker, and I mean that literally. Cowboys called genuinely strong coffee six-shooter coffee, a brew so thick it could float a pistol. Weak coffee had names too. Dehorn belly wash and brown gargle were common insults, and serving either was a trail cook's most unforgivable professional sin. Because the cook, the cocinero, as a many Texas outfits called him, was the second most important person on any cattle drive. More important than the wrangler, more important in many practical day-to-day respects than the trail boss himself, and the very first test of his authority, the first impression that determined whether 12 hard and skeptical men would trust him across 3 months and 1,000 miles of open country, was the quality of the coffee he placed in front of them before sunrise on morning one. Trail cooks kept coffee available 24 hours a day without exception. Night guards riding out to circle the herd at 2 in the morning drank a full cup before they left the firelight. Men coming off a 4-hour shift drank before they even tried to sleep. The psychopharmacology here was deliberate and sophisticated, even if nobody on the trail would have used those words. Caffeine, understood today as an adenosine receptor antagonist, meaning it physically blocks the brain's own mechanism for registering and signaling fatigue, was being administered strategically around the clock in rotating doses to maintain the functional alertness of men doing some of the most dangerous sustained endurance work in American history. Cattle drives on the Chisholm Trail ran roughly 1,500 miles from South Texas to the railheads at Abilene or Dodge City, Kansas. That journey took approximately 3 months of continuous travel. Cowboys rode in shifts, regularly covering 16 to 20 hours in the saddle during difficult river crossings, electrical storms, or the chaos of a stampede. A single stampede could require a full crew to ride at a flat gallop across broken, unpredictable terrain in complete darkness for an entire night and well into the following day. Sleep was not a right. It was a rationed luxury distributed in 3-hour increments when conditions allowed. The human nervous system was not designed for this. Coffee was the engineering workaround that made it survivable. But here's the part of the story that should genuinely stop you cold. When the coffee wasn't enough, when a man had been awake for 60 hours straight, when he was hallucinating from exhaustion in the saddle, when his body had already metabolized every molecule of caffeine he could consume and was still demanding sleep, the cowboy reached for his second stimulant, tobacco, and not to smoke it, not even to chew it. See Teddy Blue Abbott, who drove cattle from Texas to Montana in 1879, 1881, and 1883, and who later wrote his memoirs in We Pointed Them North. one of the most respected and widely cited first-hand accounts of trail life ever published, described the practice with no dramatics at all, as simply something men did when there was no other choice. During the worst stampedes, when exhaustion had crossed from discomfort into physiological emergency, cowboys would take tobacco juice, dark, concentrated, caustic, the color of tar, and rub it directly into their eyes. Let that sit for a moment. This was not pleasure. This was not recreation. This was a man deliberately pouring a chemical irritant onto his own corneas because the pain, sharp, immediate, impossible to ignore, was the only stimulus left that was powerful enough to override the nervous system's total shutdown response. The tobacco juice attacked the surface of the eye, the way smelling salts attack the nose. Pain bypasses fatigue in a way that caffeine eventually cannot. Pain cannot be reasoned with and cannot be slept through, and a man who cannot ignore the burning sensation in his eyes cannot fall asleep in his saddle, which means the cattle don't scatter across 30 miles of dark, open range, which means the outfit doesn't lose everything it spent 3 months building. Tim Lehman's Up the Trail, published by Johns Hopkins University Press and based on contemporaneous trail journals, corroborates this practice explicitly, describing cowboys who used physical pain as a deliberate, conscious physiological tool when every conventional stimulant option had been fully exhausted. That is not weakness. That is arguably the most extreme and disciplined form of self-management imaginable. These men understood the mechanics of their own bodies at a level we have entirely abandoned in the modern era of energy drinks, cortisol supplements, sleep tracking apps, and productivity systems that promise to optimize your focus while you sit in a climate-controlled room. So, why did we walk away from all of this? Why does the coffee you drink today bear such little resemblance to what those men consumed? The answer is not complicated. It is the same answer it always is when something that genuinely worked gets dismantled and replaced by something that can be more profitably mass-produced. Three things happened in sequence, and together they gutted the original system completely. First, speed. Brewing real cowboy coffee, true, full extraction, coarse ground, boiled concentrate coffee requires time and attention. You cannot rush the boil. You cannot shortcut the grind size without destroying the chemistry. The industrial food system needed coffee that could be produced in millions of units per hour, standardized, consistent, and fast enough to ship across a continent. The solution was fine grinding, which extracts faster and can be mechanized at scale, but which also over-extracts bitter compounds and under-delivers on the volatile aromatics that matter most. Speed won, the drinker lost. Second, cost. The Arbuckle's patent process, that egg white and sugar glaze that sealed the aromatic oils inside the roasted bean, added measurable labor and material cost per unit. It could not survive the race to the bottom of commodity pricing that defined the early 20th century food industry. As industrial coffee operations scaled up, they competed viciously on price, and the Arbuckle preservation process was an early casualty. It disappeared from commercial production by the early 1900s, replaced by cheaper paper and foil packaging that was faster to produce but far less effective at preserving the chemistry that actually mattered to the person drinking it. Third, electricity. Refrigeration and climate-controlled storage environments made freshness appear to be a solved problem, but cold storage only slows oxidation. It does not stop it, and it created a deep and lasting false confidence throughout the supply chain. Roasters, distributors, and retailers all assumed that temperature management had bought enough time. So the urgency around truly sealing and preserving roasted beans was quietly downgraded from a primary engineering problem to an afterthought. The modern industry's answer to stale coffee was not better preservation. It was more flavoring, darker roasting to mask the staleness, and better marketing. Here is the hidden cost that the industry will never voluntarily explain to you. The caffeine content in a cup of coffee is not the primary variable that separates real alertness from the flat, jittery exhaustion you feel 2 hours after your morning cup. The volatile organic compounds, caffeistol, cowol, and the full range of chlorogenic acids that degrade fastest after roasting are the very compounds responsible for coffee's sustained, longer-lasting neurological effects. You can consume an identical number of milligrams of caffeine from a stale grocery store pod as from a properly preserved, freshly brewed whole bean cup, but the full spectrum physiological effect, the genuine sustained clarity, the absence of the sharp crash and hollow rebound, requires the complete chemistry that industrial processing systematically destroys long before the bag reaches your hand. Cowboys weren't just consuming caffeine, they were consuming the whole plant's preserved chemistry, concentrated and brewed without filtering, and their bodies ran on it for months at a time across conditions that would hospitalize most people alive today. So, what do you actually do with this information? You do not need a horse or a chuck wagon. You need three things, and I will give you the easiest one first. The simplest change you can make today costs almost nothing. Buy whole bean coffee and grind it yourself immediately before brewing. Every minute between grinding and brewing is active oxidation, destroying your cup before you drink it. A basic hand grinder runs $15 at most hardware stores. Use a coarse grind. Start with cold water. Bring it to a full boil. Pull it off the heat. Let it rest for 4 to 5 minutes. Then drop a splash of cold water into the pot to settle the grounds to the bottom and pour. That's it. That is the Cowboy method. It requires nothing but a grinder, a pot, and your attention. No machine, no subscription, no pod, no app. If you want to go further, seek out small batch roasters who print a roast date on the bag. Not a best by date, an actual roast date. You want beans roasted within the past 2 to 4 weeks. Anything beyond that window, and you are tasting the fading memory of what coffee once was in that bag. Look for the words natural process or unwashed on the label, as these processing methods preserve more of the bean's natural oils from the start. Ask about roast level. Lighter roasts preserve more of the volatile aromatics and actually carry more caffeine by volume than dark roasts, which burn those compounds away in pursuit of the bold, bitter flavor that the modern market was trained to associate with strength. And at the absolute minimum, if you change nothing else today, pick up the bag in your kitchen right now, turn it over, find the roast date. If there is no roast date printed anywhere on that bag, or if the date is more than 6 weeks in the past, you are paying full price for the empty shell of an experience. You are not broken for feeling like your coffee stopped working. You were sold a product engineered for the supply chain, not for you. That is not your fault, but now you know. Those cowboys riding the Chisholm Trail in 1882 were not primitive men stumbling across a continent on luck and stubbornness. They were methodical, experienced engineers of human endurance who understood their physiology with a directness and honesty that the modern wellness industry has spent a century obscuring behind branded labels and subscription boxes. They knew what their bodies needed, they knew how to get it, and they knew what to do when the system was pushed past its ordinary limits. The knowledge wasn't lost. It was abandoned, traded away for convenience, shelf life, and quarterly margins, and then left sitting on the grocery store shelf inside a bag with no roast date and a picture of a mountain on it. We are digging up what the industrial food system buried: the real methods, the real substances, the real practices that kept human beings functional, sharp, and alive before the modern world decided that efficiency was more important than efficacy. If that is the kind of investigation you want more of, subscribe and come along for every one of them, and tell us in the comments what forgotten practice, what discarded method, what piece of knowledge the modern world quietly threw away do you want us to dig up next.